In this video, let's take a look at the offset command in both simple and more complex methods of using it. I'm going to draw this object over here, and we'll use offset a number of times. We could use direct distance entry to do some of it, but let's just see how we could do it as an alternative way with the offset command. If I draw the line, I get in the line command, and let's say I draw a vertical line. I don't know how long it is. I draw a horizontal line. I don't really care how long it is, and hit enter. The distance from the bottom up to here is 1 unit, and the distance from this line over here is 1 unit. So I could say offset. When it says specify the offset distance, I could type in a 1 and hit enter. When it says to select the object to offset, I can pick one object only. You can't use crossing or window to grab a bunch of objects. It's one object at a time. When it says specify a point on the side to offset, that means in this case either above it or below it. It then goes back to selecting an object. I select an object. I can pick one side or the other. I'll pick in this direction. And that's the beginning of my object. I can see now that I need to offset again the left one over 2 units and the bottom one up 4. So I'll get out of offset. I can get back into offset, set the distance to 2 and hit enter, pick the left one again and go over this way and get out. Get back into offset, set my distance to 4, hit enter, pick the bottom line and go up 4 units. Now I'm ready to trim. I could use the trim command. When I say trim, it says select cutting edges. If I hit enter, they're all cutting edges. Now I can trim up to the top, trim these down to here, trim these over here, and then trim these in here because everything was a cutting edge. To place that circle a 1/2 inch down from the top and a 1/2 inch over from the right, I can again use offset. When it says what distance, I can type in 0.5 and hit enter. Offset this one over, this one down, and hit enter. Now I'm ready for my circle, and I know that I didn't dimension it, but it's a 0.2 radius circle, let's say. So circle at that intersection, center radius. When it asks for the radius, I'll type in 0.2, and I get the circle in there. I could now erase the 2 offset lines. I just used the offset lines to locate where the center of the circle was, and then we're done. Actually, it looks like that circle's a little bit bigger. Now, with the offset command, we have a couple of other methods of using offset. One method is to offset through. Let's say that I had a line going down this way. I'll open my toolbar. The toolbar I want to open is under AutoCAD and Object Snap. So I've got my toolbar open. Let's say that I wanted to offset this line so that the new line went through the midpoint of this diagonal line. I could say offset, right click and say through. I want to go through a point. I pick the object I want to offset, and then I want to know what point do I want to go through. The through point might be the midpoint of this object here. So I didn't know what the distance was from here to here exactly, but I knew I wanted to go through the midpoint of that line. So I said offset through, pick the object, and then the point. The same thing might be true with a circle. If you offset a circle, let's say I wanted to offset this circle until it went through that endpoint. If I say offset and say through, select the object and the point you want to go through, and it offsets it. When you offset circles, you can offset, let's say offset again. Let's say that I said 0.5 this time for my offset. Now when it says object to offset, you can keep offsetting circles and making concentric circles and go as far out as you want. If you try to go in, you can only go in until there is no more room to make it smaller. So I can't make it a 1/2 inch smaller than this one because it's already smaller than a 1/2 inch radius. The same thing would be true for arcs. If I had an arc and I offset the arc, let's say that I said offset and make the distance 1. I can keep offsetting the arc to make it larger as many times as I want to, but if I try to offset it inside, there's a limit to how far you can go. You can't make it smaller than a 0 radius, obviously, so it just stops. So that is the offset command using through. We have another option called erase. If I get into offset and say erase, It says erase the source object after offsetting. By default it's set to no. You generally don't erase it. That's why we have them left on the screen when we're done offsetting. But if I say yes, and then I set the distance to 1, and I offset this arc out 1, I get the new one offset 1 from where the old one was, and it erased the old one. Okay? So if I offset again, or offset one of these circles, or a line, it erases the original. So by default it was set to no. We don't erase. Once I set it to yes, it stays that way until I reset it. From drawing to drawing, it'll still be set to no or yes. The last one is layer. If you're not familiar with layers, you can watch the 2 layer videos. But with the layer offset, just like when you make a copy of an object, it copies it onto the layer that the object was. If I make the dimension layer the current layer, and I draw a line, it's red. If I go back to the part layer and offset again with an offset of 1, let's reset our erase mode and set it back to no. Now if I set the distance to 1 and hit enter, if I go to offset this object, even though the part layer, which is black, is the current layer, when I offset, it offsets it to the current layer, just like copy does. If I use the copy command and selected these objects and this one, I could make copies of them, and the new ones are on the same layer that the old ones were. The 2 red ones are still red, the black one's still red because they're on dimension layer and part layer. Now, on the offset command, we have one more option, and that is the layer option. And the 2 choices in the layer option is either current or source. The default is source. In other words, if it was on a particular layer like part, the new one will be on part also. But I could change it from the default to current. Now, if I say offset, set a distance, pick this object here, it goes to the current layer, which it already was. But if I pick one of these red objects on layer dimension, it offsets it now to the part layer instead of going to the red dimension layer like it would have before. If you want to change that again, you can get into the offset command, go to layer, and go back to source, which was the default. The last thing we might do with offset is offset a polyline. If I turn this object, which is now not a polyline, it's just a bunch of separate pieces, if I turn this into a polyline, I could go to Modify, Edit Polyline, or type in PE, select any part of it. When I'm done turning it into a polyline, I hit Enter. The choice we have for joining them together is Join, and I'll just window it all in. And now it says 5 segments were added to the polyline. I'll hit Enter because I'm done. As I approach it now, you'll see that the whole thing is one object, so it's now a polyline. If I offset the polyline, let's say that I said 1.5 for my offset distance. If I select my polyline and offset it, it offset the entire polyline.